finally managed to get it repaired. So, the Ninth Doctor. He was portrayed by actor Christopher Eccleston. He was in the role for 1 year, comprising 13 episodes across 10 different stories, with his first episode, Rose, airing on the 26th of March 2005, and his last episode, Parting of the Ways, debuting on the 18th of June 2005. So, same year, one series, 13 episodes, and is one of the shortest serving Doctors. That being said, however, he is still a fairly iconic Doctor, and for many fans, such as myself, he was actually their first. He was the first Doctor for a lot of people, and the introduction for many of us to the Doctor Who fandom. While I'm sure some may have been there at a lot of you may have been there at the start with William Hartnell, some may have come in with Tom Baker, or even later down the line. For a lot of people, Christopher Eccleston was their introduction to the franchise. Over his short tenure as a Doctor, he fought off against classic Doctor Who monsters, mainly the Autons and the Daleks, but then also had a whole load of new monsters they had to face, which showed that Doctor Who still could do new things, facing off against villains like the villainous Cassandra, the Gelth, the Slitheen, the Jagrafest, the Reapers, and the Nanogenes. Across his time, he also had 3 different companions. While his main one, who remained throughout the entire thing, was Rose Tyler, played by actress Billie Piper, he also did pick up 2 more along the way, those being a tech genius from the not too distant future at the time, Adam Mitchell, played by Bruno Langley, and of course the ever-present hero, Captain Jack Harkness, played by John Barrowman, who they of course pick up in World War II London. Now, Eccleston ultimately left the show after 1 year. I'm not entirely sure why. I've heard various things online. From what I gather, it was sort of a professional disagreement. He wanted to go one way, they wanted to go another, so eventually he thought, look, maybe it's best. We brought back the show, it's probably best I duck out early. But despite that, he's still iconic. I mean, his costume for the time, it's simple, but then again, that was one of the things that was great about it. I mean, one of the things about the Doctor Who costume is that while there are some Doctors that you can replicate with very few parts, there are some that do need quite a lot of accessories. But Eccleston's Doctor's costume, it was fairly simple, usually being a certain colour of jumper, whether it be green, purple, or the like, and a leather jacket. Hey, it's not exactly the same, but anyone can replicate that. So it is nice that you can have a Doctor costume that's recognisable and that you can replicate yourself at home. And as I said, for a lot of people, this was their first Doctor, myself included. I will admit, when I was introduced to Doctor Who back in 2005, I would have been about 8 years old, I wasn't entirely sure what to make of this show. I mean, I was introduced to it and I was like, okay. But then after a few episodes, I really grew to enjoy this show. I mean, I personally think the best episode of, or best story of Christopher Eccleston's one series is The Empty Child and the Doctor Dances, because I remember hiding behind the sofa with that monster, with that child in a gas mask. I found that terrifying at the time. I remember hiding behind my hands whenever that thing was on screen. It was just terrifying. But then, for a guilty pleasure episode or a guilty pleasure story, I found I really like Aliens in London and World War Three. I mean, I admit it's probably not the best, and some people will go to the likes of Dalek or Rose or hell, even Boomtown or even Party of the Ways. But the one story that I personally love is the Slitheen two-parter fairly early on. I mean, it's a political thriller, and it manages to present a view of how I think humanity would react if we discovered aliens were above us. Like, our first thing to do would be panic and look to people in charge to find out what's going on. And they might not always have our best interests at heart. Now, despite all of this, not all of Eccleston's tenure has aged particularly well. I mean, a lot of it has aged fairly well, but the one story that I feel I have to look back on and say has probably not aged that well is the first part of the finale, that being Bad Wolf. Namely because they rely on game shows, well, part one at least relies on game shows that were popular around that time. And given now that The Weakest Link and Big Brother are now, in Britain at least, off the air, it's fair to say that part has aged not too well. That being said, though, Christopher Eccleston's Doctor has actually managed to spawn a phrase: never skip 9. And despite the fact that he is technically in chronological order the 10th Doctor, we just refer to him as the ninth one because he was the ninth one we were introduced to. We hadn't yet known about John Hurt's Doctor, so we didn't know about that yet. But he is still a great Doctor, and the phrase originated because with the 10th Doctor actor, who we'll get to, it's said that people who are a fan of the 10th Doctor tend to kind of skip over the ninth and go straight to Doctor number 10. But 9 really does have some great stories in there, and that's why the phrase never skip 9 originated. So, yeah, the Ninth Doctor definitely had some good stuff, and you should definitely check him out if you haven't already. He's a great jumping on point for the series, and if you haven't seen him yet, what are you doing? I mean, just go off, watch a couple of episodes of the Ninth Doctor, and then come back. You know what? He's a really good Doctor, and he was my first, and he's what got me into the franchise. So, yeah. Anyway, the next one up is my personal favourite, the 10th Doctor. Can't wait to do that. Anyway, until then, see ya.